Today's talk is on houseplant problems, and it's presented by Lauren Fordyce. Lauren is the Urban and Community IPM Educator for UC IPM. She holds a BS in Environmental Science and has several years of experience working in both agriculture and home horticulture. Most recently, she managed a Master Gardener program for the Rutgers Cooperative Extension in Southern New Jersey. Lauren, you can go ahead and share your screen.
All right, so hello everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lauren Fordyce, and we're going to be talking all about houseplants today. Many of us have houseplants in our homes because they help liven a space up. They, add some aesthetics to the place, but also research has suggested that having houseplants can reduce stress and improve our cognitive functioning. So we're going to talk about how using an IPM approach can help make houseplant care as stress-free as possible so that we can reap all of those benefits. We're going to learn how to identify, prevent, and manage pests on our houseplants. So very quickly, here's an outline of what we'll be discussing today, starting with what IPM is, how houseplants end up getting problems, and then some of those common pests and problems, how we might control and prevent them, and then some easy to grow plants and recommendations for care. So if you're not familiar with the term IPM, it means integrated pest management. And this is a way that we can manage pests in our homes, offices, schools, landscapes, pretty much anywhere. It relies on management methods that have proven to not only be effective, but minimize risks to humans and the environment. So IPM is a safer way to manage pests using pesticides only when necessary. And when we think of pests, we often might think of only insects, but pests can also include animals, weeds or plants, and pathogens like fungi, bacteria, and viruses. So when your houseplant develops a pest problem, you might be confused, wondering how did this happen? How did aphids end up in my house and on my houseplant? And there's usually several ways that this can happen. First of all, it's coming from the nursery or the store, wherever you bought the plant from. It already might have had pests on it or affecting it, and you just didn't notice. If that's the case, when you bring that new plant indoors around your other plants, like in this picture, it's very easy for them to spread to one another. And the same thing can happen if you give your houseplant a vacation to the outdoors during the summertime, like many of us do, and it picks up some pests while outside. Same thing happens. Other ways is through just improper care, lack of understanding of how to properly care for the plant, and sanitization issues as well. So it's funny, houseplants are like us. They have very specific requirements for what they need to be happy and healthy, and if they're unmet, they will let you know. So in the next couple of slides, we're going to talk about some common insect and mite pests, including fungus gnats, mealybugs, scales, aphids, thrips, whiteflies, and spider mites, and then some plant pathogens, including disease-causing bacteria and fungi like powdery mildew, gray mold, fungal leaf spots, root rots, and viruses. Before we dive into those, though, I want to make sure that everyone knows what honeydew is, because we'll be talking about several honeydew-producing insects in this presentation. So these insects include whiteflies, mealybugs, soft scales, and aphids, and they feed on the sugary plant sap, which as a result, they excrete a sugary sweet substance that we call honeydew. In those left two photos there, you can see the leaf having this shiny, wet looking appearance, and that is honeydew on the leaf. This attracts ants because ants like all things sugary and sweet. And the ants will actually protect these honeydew producing insects. In that top right photo, what is circled are ants protecting soft scales. So this is a big problem outside, but this could also mean ants might be coming into your home for this reason as well. So now you've got two pests to deal with. Lastly, honeydew buildup can cause sooty mold, and that's those black spots, that kind of black sooty appearance on the leaves that grows on top of the honeydew, sometimes restricting sunlight from getting to the leaves. So in IPM, it's very important to accurately identify the pests that you're dealing with. So we're going to look at some common insect and mites so that you can accurately do that, because all insect and mite and bacteria, all pests are managed differently. So fungus gnats are probably the most common and bothersome houseplant pests. If you have an infestation, they're probably flying around your house, especially if you are over near the houseplant, moving around the leaves or the soil, you'll disturb them and they'll fly up out of the soil. They resemble fruit flies or very, very tiny mosquitoes with their black bodies and long, skinny legs. Their larvae feed in the soil on the plant roots, causing stunted plant growth and wilting. They thrive in moist environments, so overwatering and top watering are primary causes for fungus gnat infestations. Mealybugs are small, white, honeydew producing insects. They can often be found on the little notch where the leaves meet the stem, and they cause stunted plant growth as well, wilting and yellow leaves, in addition to this cottony white powdery appearance on the leaf surface. They're very common on succulents and cacti, in addition to orchids and palms. Soft scales are another honeydew producing insect that appears as little brown bumps or spots on the leaves. You might just think that they are a part of the plant because they latch on and kind of hang out in the same spot for their entire life. So they don't move very much. And if you're trying to discern them from just a part of the plant, if you scrape them with your fingernail and it comes back a little waxy or greasy, then you have soft scales. That waxy outer coating that you feel is why pesticides aren't very effective at controlling them, because that protects them from pesticides. Soft scales can reduce plant vigor, and many houseplants are also susceptible to them. Aphids, another very common pest to all kinds of plants, including houseplants. They can be a variety of colors from green to brown to orange to black, and they're often present in very high numbers. These are also honeydew producers, and their feeding can cause leaves to contort and curl, looking very distorted. If they've been on your plant for a while, you'll notice their white exoskeletons left behind as they morph into adults. This is usually not a great sign. Thrips are very small, slender pests, and they can cause irregular scarring and leaf distortion, as you can see in that bottom photo. That top photo there gives you an idea of how tiny they are. And when they feed on flowers, they cause white stippling. The leaves may also appear a little bit silvery. And these little guys can sometimes bite and fly. Last of the insect pests are whiteflies. These are also honeydew producing insects, and they're commonly found on the undersides of leaves. They thrive in moist environments, so are very, very common to greenhouses. And if you just bought your plant from a greenhouse, it may end up coming home with you with some whiteflies on it too. Their feeding can cause leaves to turn yellow and drop, and they're common on poinsettias and begonias. Spider mites are not insects, but rather they are arachnids like spiders and ticks, and they're very tricky pests to control because they're very, very small. Oftentimes, if we have a spider mite infestation, we'll notice because of the signs of their damage, which includes the stippled leaves, as you can see in that bottom left photo, or the webbing in that top right photo, in addition to small little fecal spots on the bottom of the leaf in that top left photo. So they thrive in dry and dusty environments. So if that's something, especially in the wintertime, that happens, increasing the humidity just a little bit can really help there. So now that we're familiar with some of the common insect and mite pests that might attack our plants, some control options for managing them in IPM, we're going to start with the non-chemical control options first. Many houseplant pests can be effectively controlled without the use of pesticides. So for the flying insects like whiteflies, fungus gnats, and aphids, we like to use yellow sticky traps. These can be a cheap and effective control option. You can find them pretty much anywhere. They're usually yellow because yellow is attractive to flying insects. It reminds them of the sun. And this is also a great tool for monitoring. If you start to notice a couple too many fungus gnats showing up, you might take that as a hint to cut back on your watering and start watering from the bottom in order to kind of prevent that from becoming a bigger issue. Another thing we can do is give our plants a shower. This is great for aphids, mealybugs, whiteflies, spider mites, and thrips. A strong stream of water is usually very effective at knocking them off. We can do this in the sink, in the shower, outside with the hose, anything with a strong enough stream to really knock them loose. Keep in mind this will not work for fungus gnats because they live in the soil and they fly, nor the soft scales because they latch onto the plant and really aren't going anywhere after that. And another thing that we can do is remove infected leaves or handpick or scrape off the insects. Usually on our houseplants, there are few enough insects that we can do this. Just going in and manually picking them off or smushing them is usually pretty good at just controlling them. But if necessary, you might need to prune out certain leaves or branches. And if that doesn't seem to fix your problem, or if you would like to use pesticides, a horticultural oil or insecticidal soap will help with most of these pests, except for fungus gnats and scales, as mentioned. You just want to be sure that the product that you use is safe to use indoors and on houseplants. So for fungus gnat infestations, we kind of talked about this, but you want to let the soil dry out in between waterings because having moist, wet soil is really, really great for them. We want to water from the bottom so that the top of the soil isn't wet where they can lay their eggs. And a rubbing alcohol or BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, soil drench can also help kill the soil larvae. For scales, as we mentioned, pesticides aren't very effective. They're only effective in the crawler or nymph stage when they're very young and susceptible. However, it's usually really hard to determine when this is happening because they're very small. So if you are worried about them, you might use some double-sided sticky tape around your plant to kind of keep an eye on when the crawlers emerge. But a cotton ball soaked in 70% rubbing alcohol and placed on the soft scale or mealybug can also work. Just if you do plan on doing that, you want to test how your plant will react to a little bit of rubbing alcohol on it first. Make sure it doesn't burn it, and then go ahead and do this on your plant. And worst case scenario, if things are really bad, just get rid of your houseplant. Sometimes we can't save them all, and sometimes they're just too far gone. So if that's the case, just go buy yourself a new one. If you do choose to use pesticides, I just want to make sure that we read the pesticide label. Make sure again that it is safe to use indoors and is registered for use on houseplants. We also want to make sure that we're using the correct amount. Oftentimes, if we're not using a ready-to-use product like those in this picture, it requires a little bit of mixing and doing some math. If we've got a 16-ounce spray bottle and the label calls for a ratio with a gallon, then we've got to do that math to figure the right amount out, because if we over-apply, that's not only wasting the product, but it can harm the plant itself too. And lastly, we want to make sure that we wear the proper PPE when we're doing this. The product label will tell you what is necessary, whether or not you need to wear goggles or gloves or whatever. But generally, it is recommended to wear long sleeve pants and shirts and gloves just to protect your skin from exposure to the product. We also want to keep children and pets away from the plant until the pesticide is dried, and this goes for all kinds of pesticides, indoor and outside. So now let's look at the different kinds of plant pathogens that cause disease or virus on our houseplants. Powdery mildew is a fungal infection that appears as white, fuzzy, gray spots on the leaves. It is a common problem in humid environments where there's not enough airflow, or maybe you have the plants a little too close together and there's prolonged leaf wetness. If that's the case, we want to try to space our plants a little further apart. We want to improve circulation and try not to get the leaves wet. Try to water at the base of the plant to keep the powdery mildew down. If you do notice this on your leaves, you can simply pick them off. That's no big deal, easy to control in small situations. Green mold is another fungal disease, primarily occurs on the older growth of plants, and you'll notice the leaves start to turn wilty, or they have gray to tan lesions on them. And this is also caused by just high humidity and prolonged leaf wetness. So we can do the same thing we would with powdery mildew, just reduce those things and remove infected leaves. Fungal leaf spots, again, another fungal pathogen. They're going to work the same way as the last two, where we want to not have the leaves constantly wet. If it's super humid or plants are super close together, we want to kind of give them some more space to breathe. Fungal leaf spots show up as tan or black irregular lesions on the leaf surface or the stem. They sometimes have this target-shaped appearance on them. So we can remove or cut out those infections when we see them. So there are several pathogens that cause root rots. This results in limp and wilting plants, often stem lesions with a mushy stem, rotting roots, and yellow leaves. They can sometimes stink because the roots are rotting. So that's another good indication that you might have a root rot going on. This is very common from overwatering, especially in sensitive plants that prefer really dry soils like cacti or aloe. I've definitely killed a lot of them by giving too much water. So this is kind of hard to control. You really need to just remove the infected plant parts and get rid of them, and make sure you sanitize those pots and whatever material was used, because it will transfer to other houseplants if you go and put another one in that pot. To prevent this, we can water less, but also improve soil drainage in our houseplant pots. We want to make sure they have a hole at the bottom. You can maybe add some rocks at the bottom, and use some light soil. A lot of times for those sensitive plants like cacti, they make special soil mixes that are a lot lighter than what you might use in your garden. Viruses are a lot less common in houseplants, but nonetheless important to cover. They can cause all kinds of abnormal colorations and textures and distorted leaves. So anything that kind of seems very out of norm could be a virus. They are spread from one plant to another through open wounds, usually through pruning cuts or through aphids or other insects that feed on the sap and can go from plant to plant. If you're a tobacco user, the tobacco mosaic virus, which attacks monsteras, can be transferred from tobacco products that you use to the house plant. So it's just important to wash your hands after using tobacco products before touching houseplants as a preventative. We also want to just try to control any sap-feeding insects on the houseplants as a preventative, and make sure that you investigate and give your plant a good inspection before buying it to make sure it doesn't have a virus. And virus-infected plants, there is no saving them. They need to be thrown away. They cannot be composted. They just need to be tossed. There's no saving them. So not all houseplant problems are caused by insects or pathogens like the ones we mentioned. And honestly, in fact, most of the time it is not caused by them. It is caused by improper care and environmental stressors. So again, this is where accurately identifying your pests and doing a little bit of investigative work to figure out what's really going on is so important, because we don't want to be treating a disease when there's not a disease there. It's just a result of us not giving the plant enough water or something. So let's look at some of those. If you notice brown leaf tips or margins like this is usually a sign that you're not giving the plant enough water, you're giving it too much water, or you're giving it an inconsistent amount of water. They're going too long in between waterings maybe. So we can just try to be more consistent with our waterings check the soil, check the soil moisture frequently. And keep in mind that some plants prefer to be on the drier side while others prefer to be on the wet side. And we just want to water in accordance to that. Something like this fern in the bottom photo prefers to be in moist soil. And if you let it dry out too much, you're going to get these brown crispy leaves. Low humidity is another cause for brown tips, especially in the winter time. So if we can, misting the plant or putting a humidifier wherever your plants are can really help with this. Lastly, you might start to see brown leaf tips if you've applied too much fertilizer, which might result in some salt buildup in the soil. And we can try to alleviate this by flushing the salts out of the soil, taking the plant, sitting it in the sink, and just letting water run through several times. If your houseplant is wilting, this is likely a result of it not getting enough water, to no one's surprise. And this can be a sign that it's telling you it really wants more water. A lot of times plants are dramatic, especially these peace lilies. You give them a little bit of water and they will perk right back up. So don't let them fool you into thinking they're completely dead. If your houseplant if the soil is indeed wet enough and you're like, no, it's definitely getting enough water, it's not wilting because it's too dry, then you want to pull it out and look at its roots. Because if that's the case, then we might have a case of root rot going on from overwatering. So you want to check those roots, make sure they're not discolored or mushy or stinky, to make sure that root rot's not going on. Yellow leaves, these can be a sign of all kinds of different things. So through process of elimination, we'll first look for insects, make sure we don't see any, check the undersides of leaves, check the soil, check the stems. And if we don't see any, then let's maybe think about, are we giving the plant enough sunlight? Are we giving it enough water? And if one of those two things could be a little bit better, try that and see if it makes a difference. And again, we'll look for root rots here as well, pull the plant out and examine the roots. If they are all present and looking fine and healthy, maybe just poking out of the bottom and there's a lot of them, then this might also just be a plant's way of telling you that it wants a bigger pot. It's a little root bound. So put that plant in a pot about 2 inches bigger than what it's currently in, and the yellow leaves should subside. Leaf spots, as we talked about, can be from fungal diseases, but these can also be a sign of the plant getting too much sunlight. So we've all done it where we have a nice warm day, warm sunny day, and we think it would be so nice to take our houseplant outside and let it kind of bask in that for a little bit. And when you come back a couple hours later, what you find is a brown, very sad looking plant that is now sunburnt. So most plants will recover from this if you bring them back inside, maybe prune off some of the brown leaves that got torched, and they'll regrow and it'll be fine. But we just want to remember that when we want to move our houseplant outside, that's something that we need to do gradually over several weeks, because the sunlight that they receive outside directly from the sun is a lot different than the sunlight that they receive from your windowsill filtered through a window. Another reason we might have leaf spots is from cold injury. So if your houseplant was left outside or there was a drop in temperature, this can also cause the leaves to turn brown and develop these leaf spots. So we want to move it to a warmer area. It'll usually be fine unless it was a really hard freeze, which in that case you might have killed it. So keep that in mind. If you've noticed torn, gnarled, or tattered leaves, this might be the result of curious pets or children. These are 2 photos from my house and my houseplants, where my new puppy thought that it would be fun to play with my houseplants. Luckily, I caught him before he swallowed those, but this is worrisome because many houseplants are toxic to not only pets, but children as well. So we've got 2 links that we can share, one from the ASPCA with a list of houseplants that are toxic to dogs and cats, in addition to a link to the Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania with an online resource that will kind of walk you through toxic plants to children and what to do when they interact with them. So if you're looking for some easy to care for houseplants, these are very low pests, low maintenance. They can take the neglect and still be completely fine. These include peace lily, pothos, ZZ plant, cast iron plant, and snake plant. These are all plants that I've had in a variety of rooms in my house, from absolutely no light to lots of light. And they will grow and thrive in different environments. I've got some snake plants that I recently moved to a much sunnier location, and they're putting up new shoots like every other week. So they might just be slow growing, but they nonetheless will survive. So these are great plants if you're a lazy gardener, if you just don't have the time to dedicate to them right now. These are some great options. So just to kind of bring it all home, it's really important to get to know your houseplant and what its growth requirements are, what it needs to kind of be optimal. A lot of times the plant tag that you get when you buy the plant will tell you this kind of information. You can also find it online, but knowing how much sunlight, what temperature your plant wants to be at, what kind of humidity requirements it has, these are all just really, really important in allowing your plant to be healthy and reducing pest problems. You also want to make sure you're putting your plant in the right size pot when you bring it home. Don't put it in something that's too small. You're going to restrict the roots and it's going to be root bound, but you also don't want to put it in a huge pot either. Always inspect your plants before bringing them home or buying them. Make sure you don't see any signs of pests or diseases. And a good practice is to bring them home and quarantine them for a little bit from your other plants. Put them in a separate room and just check them for a week and make sure that you don't notice any signs of pests, and then bring them into the rest of your home to keep the rest of your house plants safe. We also want to be really careful about the sanitization and making sure that we have a clean environment. We want to make sure that we're not reusing the same dirty soil, diseased soil. We want to wash our pruners. We want to wash our pots. Make sure that we're killing any potential pathogens on those surfaces so that we don't reinfect other plants. And in the wintertime, like right now, it's important to remember that plants are going to be growing a lot less. They require less water. There's less sunlight. There's not a whole lot going on. So avoid fertilizing and really giving them a ton of water during this time of the year as well. So hopefully you found some of these tips helpful to care for your beloved plants and make being a plant parent stress-free. But if all else fails, there are always fake plants that look great. And there are even Lego plants now. I had no idea these existed, but they look great and they're very low maintenance. So those are always some options for you as well.
You'll have to dust the Lego ones, I think.
Yes, you will. That's the only thing you might have to do.
All right, thank you, Lauren, for that great information.